Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we are talking bladed jigs. We are talking chatterbaits. This is something you guys have been requesting all spring. We see those comments. We know that this is a video that you guys have wanted. So we finally carved some time out to sit down and talk bladed jigs, and we are going to talk everything. This is going to take a little bit of time. We are going to start out talking trailers. I want to start there. We're going to talk about traditional trailers. We're going to talk about some unique modifications you can do. Some of it is stuff that we've covered before. Some of it is brand new. Then we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the baits. We're going to talk about the different bladed jigs that are on the market, what I think your best options are. I'll give you some recommendations. And then finally, we'll talk about gear, because in the marketplace, there's a huge split in what kind of rods and line you should throw a chatterbait on. There are very good fishermen that lean both ways, so we're going to talk about those differences as well. Right off, if you're not familiar with what a chatterbait is or a bladed jig, it is literally a jig with a blade out in front, and when you run that thing through the water, that blade kicks left and right, creates an incredible amount of vibration, and gets that jig moving and swaying and puffing back behind, and it's an amazing bait. It's amazing in the springtime, it's amazing in the summertime. You can cover water with it, you catch them in the grass, you catch them in open water, you can hot bottom. Oh, we weren't supposed to talk about that yet. There's so many different things that you can do with this bait. It's phenomenal. So let's start with trailers, and then we're going to work back from there. You guys stick with me. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. Basically, you've got two options. You got a swim bait style trailer, you got a craw style trailer. Based on the color and what you're trying to imitate, you decide which way you should go. So if you're running, green pumpkin or browns or craw colors, maybe you're better off with a Craw Imitator. The two Craw Imitators that I use, or that I would recommend, the first one is going to be the Strike King Rage. And you guys, if you're not familiar, down in the video description, we link every single product that we talk about. You don't have to try and figure out what we're talking about. You open the video description, you'll see it laid out what the item is and a link where you can look at it, so you can look up close at each item. But Strike King Rage, you get so much movement out of the tails of those baits. They're phenomenal. They pair really, really well with a chatterbait. The biggest thing with chatterbait fishing, to me, is that my trailer, the movement of the trailer, the speed that it moves, the way that it moves, matches the chatterbait or the jig. I don't like when one is going fast and one is going slow. I really don't think the fish respond well to that. It's important to have baits where they work well together. So the Rage works really, really well. Either the Rage Craw or the Rage Trailer, both work great. And then this guy is a brand new Yamamoto bait I picked up and started fiddling with. They call it a cowboy. But you see how it's like a double tail grub, but look how huge these claws are. They're massive. You get a ton of movement and really good flow out of this trailer. And it's good bulk. It's a good size. I mean, it's big. You throw it on here real quick. This trailer is no joke. It really, really fills out that profile. You've got a ton of motion and a ton of size coming through the water, and pre-spawn, that's a good deal. So that cowboy is a really good option. The nice thing about a double tail grub, especially this one with those big wide tails on it, is that you're going to get a ton of movement. But the movement is dictated by whatever it's being pulled on. Whether it's on a jig, if it's on a jig, it moves slow. If you're burning on a chatterbait, they really speed up and they move well, and it matches well. So that's key. On the swim bait end of things, probably your most basic trailer is your Yamamoto Swim Senko. Very basic. It just gets back there and it just kicks. It's not big, but they work. It's a lot of people's favorite trailer. And I won't go into it a ton because it's not my favorite trailer, but I can't not talk about it because there are a lot of really good fishermen who that is their favorite chatterbait trailer. It's got a good kick, it matches well to the bait. The other guy is the Yamamoto Seiko, that guy there. That came out last year, specifically designed to pair to chatterbaits. That's specifically what it was made for. So you can see that bait. It's a swim bait profile, but you can see the ribs. It's ribbed all the way down, and then it's got a little bit of a rib to the tail. So that bait is back there. It's got a very fishy, it's not like a wide tail kick, it's a very fishy, tight kick, and it runs really well behind that bladed jig. It matches really well. It is a small profile, you'll notice. So depending on the bait that you put it on, you may need to trim up the skirt material so that they don't interfere with each other. Some baits won't have that problem. Like that guy there, see how it's puffed out more? That'll fit up inside there and they won't interfere. But this one, it's absolutely going to cause that trailer not to work if you don't do something about it. So keep that in mind. But that is a really good option. I mean, specifically designed for this application. Now last, this is something we've covered before, but I'm going to cover it again because I know some of you have not seen the older video, and this is critical. A lot of people use Kitex as trailers on their chatterbaits. A lot of people. It's a lot of people's favorite trailer. But if you put a Kitex on the back of a chatterbait and you just swim it, and specifically I like the 4.8, okay? In anything 3/8 or heavier. If you're going really, really light with your bladed jig, you go smaller, but 3/8 or heavier, I really like that 4.8 size. If you just put this on here, the blade is up there moving really fast, right? It's shaking back and forth, going super fast. But the tail of this swim bait, because the water is already disturbed out in front of it, that blade is moving so much water, this guy is in the back. It ends up, instead of running straight, they kind of tip up, and it just has a lazy kick. A lot of people still throw them. I really, really don't like that action. It's super lazy, it doesn't match right, and I've not seen that much success with it. So there are two things that you can do. Number one, take your Kitex, and instead of putting it on there right side up, turn it over. That's it. Wrong side up, so that tail is upside down. You would think that wouldn't matter, but I'm telling you, it's because of the way the water comes around the blade on the front of the bait. The way that water moves, if you run it right side up, it's going to tip up and it's going to look like garbage. If you run it upside down, it doesn't tip up and it gets a phenomenal kick and it speeds up and it matches the blade. They move at the same speed. It's all because of the way the water is coming around the blade on the front of that chatterbait. It looks fantastic. The other thing you can do with your junk baits, take your chatterbait, take your Kitex. See that tail there? I'm gonna cut that tail off, flush. So I took just the tail off, but I left that shape. You take that guy, you thread that on there, right side up. And that little trailer is no joke. That guy swims so good like that. Because you already have the vibration of the blade. That's creating movement in the bait. The skirt is pulsating and it's shaking the bait. That tail, without that resistance in the back, just follows it. And it becomes the tightest swimming. This tail is just a perfect S. Super fast in the water. Even faster than a Zako. Swims super tight and looks exactly like a bait fish that's making a run for it. I mean, exactly like it. That is a phenomenal option. Now, let's move on to the actual baits themselves, because there are so many different bladed jigs on the market. There are so many different options. Which one should you try? Which one should you avoid? It all comes down to personal opinion, okay? I mean, I'm gonna give you my opinion. My opinion is that there are only a couple bladed jigs out there that I will put my time into throwing. And I'm not brand specific. What I am is connection specific. The way that they make them matters to me. Anything that uses a double split ring, because there are, like 50 different bladed jigs on the market. Anything that works off of a double split ring, and I'm not saying one brand versus another because I don't even know who they all are, but I'll tell you, if that's the setup, I don't use them. And the reason why is in my fishing, or in what I've found going out and catching fish, The faster a blade starts to vibrate at the beginning, that is the key to chatterbait fishing. Because when I throw it up into a pocket, I want it to move instantly. The second I start to turn the handle, I want that thing kicking. And if it's a double connection, it's not instant. It takes time for it to get going. But it doesn't only matter at the beginning of the cast. It matters through the entire cast, because every time I pause, every time I break, every time I bump a piece of grass, every time I bang off of cover, the same thing happens. That blade stalls out and it takes time to speed back up. That double split ring just does not work as well as the traditional. Hands down, the Z-Man Chatterbait is the fastest starting blade that there is. But I'm not a fan of the original Chatterbait. I'm just not. So I'm going to run you through a handful of baits that I really like for this technique. And then there is one other brand. And that's, in fact, we'll just start there. The Picasso, the shock blade, they came out with a little bit different way of making a connection. I don't know if they came out with that last year or the year before, but it's been out for a little bit. But that different way of making a connection does work. That's the only other one besides the Z-Man product that I'll fish with. Because again, that blade starts really fast. It starts right away. So every time you bump cover or make a pause or do anything, it stalls and starts. That's the difference between getting bit and not getting bit, because you don't want that fish's first look, or when you make a pause, you don't want that fish to be running and go to react and then the bait's not working. That's the exact wrong time for the bait not to be working. That is the critical couple of seconds throughout your retrieve. It's the most important moment, and if it's not working right, you are wasting your time. If you're just chucking and winding straight retrieve, whatever, that's fine. But if you're doing things to get fish to react, or you're fishing cover, it's 100% critical. So the specific ones that I'll use, that Picasso shock blade is a good choice. I like that connection. It's got a solid hook in it. Overall, I have good things to say. You do need to trim the skirt. It's a very, very thin skirt material. I trim them to get a little more bulk out of it so it doesn't mess up the trailers. I think that's key. After that, we're talking all Z-Man. Let's talk about the differences between them. I mean, the first one is the most expensive bladed jig on the market, but it is consistently a bestseller. All the elites are throwing it. You look on Tackle Warehouse bestseller list, it's always on there. It's the jackhammer. So why are people spending 16 bucks on a chatterbait? What's the deal? Why is it different? Well, first off, it's got a Gamakatsu hook. It has a double keeper. I'll just run you through their features. It has a double wire keeper plus a good lead keeper. The skirt material is very, very thin, flows extremely well. Head design's solid. It's got a really, really good blade on it. A heavy blade, color is matched perfectly, and then a really, really good snap. Those are all critical things. But that bait, 100%, it starts the fastest. It is the most consistent product to product to product. They're very, very consistent. They charge a ton for them, but they have the best build quality of anyone. So, you know, if it's in your budget, the jackhammer is, in my opinion, the best chatterbait out there. But to step down from there, there are still some really good options. Now, the second one is going to be the Chatterbait Custom. I really like this bait. Chatterbait came out with the Elite a couple years ago. The difference from the Elite to the Custom is basically that they went to a stainless blade. It's a stainless steel blade. It's a stronger blade. But this bait, the Custom specifically, comes with a smaller hook. It comes with a 4/0 hook and everything but the heaviest size. So it's a significantly smaller hook, significantly, than say a Project Z. I really like that because it's not always that you need a big, heavy, giant hook. There are times when you need it. There are times where you need to catch these fish on a pool cue with a really heavy hook. But a lot of the time, especially if you're trying to catch those 2, 3, 4, 5 pound fish, you're not trying to catch 8 and 10 pounders. That lighter wire hook will stick more fish. And the overall profile weighs less, so you get better movement and vibration out of the jig. So these guys, the Z-Man, the Custom, I think bang for the buck is phenomenal. It uses a very different connection, but it's strong. It works well. It's a Arky style head. I like this bait. I think if bang for the buck is the most critical thing to you, I think that this is the best bang for the buck in chatterbaits. Smaller hook, very, very sharp. It's a good head shape, comes through cover. It's a good skirt. It uses a single wire keeper instead of a double. So single wire in there. But you put a bait up on there, thread it on. The trick to wire keepers is that you only put a bait on one time. And what I mean by that is if you go to put this bait on, you thread it on, you mess it up, and you pull it off, and you turn around and you thread it again, pull it off, you'll destroy the bait. But if you practice and you get good at it and you put them on one time and it's right the first time, they stay stuck on a wire keeper. It works really well. It's the same keeper, well, same kind of keeper that I use on the Matt Allen swim bait head. I really like this style of keeper, but the key is to thread a bait on one time. Don't try and correct them once they're on there. That'll get you. Last to be that Project Z. There, you're a heavier hook. You're using a traditional lead double barb keeper. They use a completely different skirt. I think it's a silicone skirt, maybe. I'm not sure. Different head design completely, different blade completely, but it is all really nice components. A huge upgrade from the original chatterbait. They look good, they swim good, the action is there, they're nice baits. But I'll tell you again, from a personal opinion, these are cheaper. These are $1 less, the customs, and I like them better. It's personal opinion. Hook is way smaller, profile overall way smaller, but they flat get bit. If I'm gonna spend the money, I spend the money and go all the way up to the jackhammer. I mean, those are my two favorites. This is running a 4/0 hook, jackhammer's running a 5/0 hook, all upgraded components, but you're talking about like, I think $6.99 and $15.99. There's a big difference between them, but both are killers. So I hope that helps you guys, because there are so many blades on the market, so many different baits. But if you stick to those baits that, see, all chatterbaits, they use a straight connection. It goes straight from the wire to the blade. See that? Those always start to vibrate faster. And then that Picasso, it's using kind of a double barb, but same concept. And it works really well too. Also, they say that they design theirs to stay down. I think that's why they have the holes poked in the blade. They do stay down a little bit better. So if you're fishing deeper, and the Picasso comes in a ton of sizes. So if you are fishing deeper, again, that's a really good option. But overall, my two picks are the jackhammer and then that custom. I think that's the way to go. How many times have I said that, right? Now, retrieve-wise, retrieve is critical because you can just throw a chatterbait out there and just reel it back, and you'll catch fish. That bugger's just vibrating, tail's looking good, everything looks good. Don't worry about color. Color's up to you guys. You know, match what's in your water. Throw green pumpkins, throw shad colors, throw bluegill colors. That changes lake to lake. But retrieve, you can just chuck and wind, just cover water. But I'll tell you what, one of the best things you can do during a retrieve is to vary it. If you have cover, if you have sparse grass, if you have lay down wood, if you have anything you can bang into, dock pilings, that's great. Throw it right up alongside that stuff, run it down, and then it'll bang into the cover and it will naturally deflect. It'll kick off, the blade will stop, and then it starts up again. That's that magic moment where a fish that's following will just come in and kill it. But if you don't have cover, you want to create that yourself. So there are a couple things you can do. If you're burning that bait along, you're just reeling it, you can just pause it, right? You just stop, and then, but you don't want to pause for long. You just want it to drop for a second. It's basically just a breaking cadence. You just stop. That works really well. You'll see a lot of guys pump them, but what I've found that works better than a pump is a burn and then pump it with the reel. So you're reeling along, and then you just give it one fast turn of that handle in the middle of your retrieve, and it almost imitates bumping cover. Right, that bait's just kicking along, and then it runs for it. It darts, speeds up, and it will almost always cause it to change direction a little bit, either rise or go to the side. But it's that moment where if a bass is following and that chatterbait's up there kicking, that bass is just tailing it. When that thing makes that dart, the bass thinks that thing's got my number. It's making a run for it, and they kill it right away. They don't give it any time. So you'll be reeling, pump it, and you just instant hook set right away. And then the last way that I fish a chatterbait is slow on bottom. I've done better with it night fishing than I have in the day, but I've caught big ones in the daylight too. My biggest night fish on a chatterbait is just shy of 12 pounds. Biggest day fish, hopping bottom like this, is a 9 3/4. What you do is exactly, those of you that have watched our LV500 videos or our lipless videos, we talk about slow fishing on bottom. We do the exact same thing with that chatterbait. That's why we have these heavier sizes. That's a 3/4. The Picasso comes all the way up to 2 ounces. But put a craw trailer on it. Don't use a swim bait trailer. Use something like that Cowboy on there, something that's gonna have a lot of movement really quick. Throw that thing out, let it go to bottom. And again, this is another one of those times where that blade starting right away is so critical. Because you throw that thing out, let it settle to bottom, and then all you do is just pull it up, and it's gonna vibrate up. It'll kick up off the bottom. And then you just hold the rod tip and you just let it settle back to bottom on its own. Reel up your slack, pull it up, reel down, pull it up. So you're just swimming it up off the bottom and then letting it flutter back down. Swimming up, flutter back down. It draws that same bite as the lipless, as a spoon. It's just that reaction bite to either something that's making a run for it or something that's wounded and dying. It kind of replicates both of those things. But again, this is one of those times where that start time is so urgent, because if you're only pulling it a foot and a half, and it takes a foot and a half for the blade to start kicking, it's useless. But if that blade kicks the first time you move it, you've got a really good swim. And then same thing with that trailer. You want a trailer that starts right away. If you put, a swim bait style trailer on, try and do this, the swim bait's barely even kicking by the time it's stalling back out. But something like this is gonna kick right away, and then it's gonna swim its way back down too. Kick right away, swim its way back down. That's critical. I typically do that style of retrieve with craw colors, with browns, blacks, black and blue, green pumpkin, and then paired with a craw trailer. That's just where I've seen my best success, hopping bottom with it. But all of those are good retrieves. Now, last but not least, let's talk about the gear. Let's talk about the rods, because there are two very different trains of thought. And I'm going to tell you where I am. I'm the guy that throws it on heavier gear. I throw it on braid. I throw it on 50-pound braid. Corrado 70 is what I throw them on either way. But I throw it on a fast retrieve ratio. I throw it on a 7-to-1. And then I throw it on a 7-foot or longer medium heavy rod at a minimum. And if I'm in heavy cover, I even go to a heavy rod, but typically medium heavy. 7.2, 7.3 medium heavy has worked extremely well for me. It's got some backbone to it. So when I'm reeling that thing along and I pause it and a fish eats it, I smash on them. Even with that lighter hook, with a medium heavy rod, you're not gonna bend that hook. Set your drag, even with braid. So I go 50-pound braid to typically a 15-pound mono leader is what I fish it on. This is not finesse fishing. I'll even go up to a 20-pound leader if I've got the clarity, or if it's murky is what I mean. If it's not crystal clear, I'll go to 20-pound because it just doesn't matter in that murkier water. But on that setup, when they eat that thing, I can really hit them. And a chatterbait bite's funny. A lot of times they'll smash it, but more often than not, you'll be reeling that thing along and all you'll feel is you got this perfect vibration and it'll just stop. Because when that fish comes up from behind and they clamp on it, you don't immediately feel them clamp on it. You feel when they stop the blade, it stops shaking. Because a fish will come in behind, and what they'll do is they'll fully engulf the bait, and they're still coming at you, and then they turn sideways. And that's when it draws tight. So if you're not paying attention, all of a sudden it'll jerk. But really, you almost blew it. That fish already had that bait. So when I'm reeling that thing along, if that blade ever stops vibrating, slam that hook set right away. That's the way I like to fish a chatterbait. Now there's a whole second group of anglers that do not agree. They use moderate rods. Very lighter, I shouldn't say light action, but lighter action rods. Medium, moderate. Some guys will even throw them on crankbait rods, and they're all using fluorocarbon. I do fish that style too, but I go heavy if I can get away with it. But what's the deal? Well, because I'm not the best at it, I went and asked some people that were a lot better than me, and I polled a bunch of my friends. Why are you throwing it on a moderate rod on fluorocarbon? What's the deal? What's your 2 cents? Why do you do it? And I got a bunch of answers, and it matched my own fishing. And what the answer is the guys that want to throw it on fluoro and moderate, the one thing that's true across all of it is they're all grass fishermen. And I think that we've got our thumb on the issue. The issue is when you're fishing on that heavier gear like I do, and you're in grass, you get it hung up in the grass and you rip it out, right? When you rip it on braid and a heavy rod, it comes flying out of that grass. But if you do it on that lighter stuff, when you go to pull it out, that rod kind of loads up, that fluoro stretches out. When it comes loose, there's some acceleration time. Essentially what it boils down to is you leave the cover slower. So if you hang up in the grass and a fish comes down there to look at it, if you're throwing it on that heavy rod and you rip it out of there, that thing just takes off like a rocket, and that fish is now left behind and it has to try and catch up. If you're on that lighter rod, fluorocarbon, when you finally break free, it takes time for it to accelerate like a slingshot. It takes time to speed up, and that fish is right there on it. They eat it as it comes out of the grass. That seems to be the difference. If you're primarily a grass guy, you at least need to experiment with that moderate gear. My favorite rod for that style, I just started playing with that Bantam. We did a review of that. Tim and I both scooped that reel up. So I just started playing with that Bantam, but I've always thrown it on a Corrado 70. But the rod that I like is that there's a cash-in, and I'll give you the model down in the video description, but it's a 7'1". It is a micro guide rod, which I typically don't use, but because this application is specifically fluorocarbon, I tried it. You guys already knew that we picked up a few of these rods to try them because we kept getting requests. So we picked up a handful of them. I think we picked them up in the fall and then played with them through the winter and now played with them this spring. But their chatterbait rod I really like. It's got a really, really moderate, slower action to it, and those fish really load up well on it. So that's the rod that I've enjoyed when I'm pairing with fluoro. Otherwise, that mid sevens is that 7.2 medium heavy. That's the way that I go. That's the way I've always gone. But I'm open-minded. I'm still playing with my options, and I do really, really like this. When I get in that grass, I have seen a difference. Those guys were right. It does accelerate slower, and it gets a bit better coming out of the grass. But everything else, I'm still a heavy rod guy. Personal preference. Guys, I hope that helps you. We just talked for a long time. That is pretty much everything you could ever want to know about chatterbaits or bladed jigs. We've covered trailers, we've covered the styles of the jig itself and why it matters, getting that acceleration, getting trailers that match, and then depending on the type of cover that you're fishing, pairing it appropriately to the rod and reel and line. Again, we covered a ton of stuff, so links to everything will be down in the video description. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so that you know when we're putting out new videos, but they do come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then if you enjoyed this video, leave us a comment so we know about it. Tell us the videos that you want us to do in the future. We are here to teach you guys. We're here to take you along on the water, but we want to know what you want to learn so that we're teaching you the right stuff. So leave those comments. We do see them even when we don't have time to respond to them. We appreciate you. Again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon.